Welcome to Devotions from Israel, a 5-minute word of encouragement. Today's devotion comes from Luke 19. How tall are you? Now, this may be a strange or odd question with which to begin this devotion, and yet we want to talk about a guy who was short in size. Now, personally, I just had a physical myself, and I am not surprised that I was typically a 5'8" person, and now they measured me at 5'7", so I'm shrinking in size, I suppose. I think that's what happens when you get older. And yet this short man mentioned in Luke 19 was a man who would be transformed by the friendship of Jesus. Now, Jericho is a very hot place, typically, all year round, although in the winter it can be very pleasant. It doesn't get much rain at all. And yet this location of what we call New Testament Jericho was just to the south of the Old Testament site where Joshua would defeat this first Canaanite city. It's called Tel Es Sultan today. But the area of New Testament Jericho, as I mentioned, was a few miles to the south. In fact, most importantly, also located here in this area was Herod's winter palace. It had previously been a Hasmonean palace, but Herod the Great, who incidentally died here in 4 BC, even had a palace with a swimming pool. In fact, he enjoyed the winters here in contrast to Jerusalem and the colder, rainy days that happened there during the course of 3 or so months out of the year. But when we talk about Luke 19, here comes Jesus. He's walking through this area of Jericho, and this is what we read. Now Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was wealthy. He had come to see who Jesus was because he was short. However, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I have given my possessions, half of them to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay him back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Now, when we read and understand the nature and even the culture that serves as the backdrop for this story, Zacchaeus, of course, was viewed as an outcast. He was a tax collector. He was associating with the Romans, who were, of course, oppressing the Jews. And yet when we read from, for instance, the Babylonian Talmud, it says a certain Abba Saul said this, there were sycamore tree trunks in Jericho, and the men of violence seized them by force, whereupon the owners arose and consecrated them to heaven. Now, typically, sycamore tree wood was used for the beams of a roof. And yet, the Jewish Mishnah would reference sycamore trees as well. And let me read what appears in the Mishnah. This could add context to the story. A tree may not be grown within a distance of 25 cubits from the town, or 50 cubits if it is a carob or a sycamore tree. Why? Because these types of trees were considered unclean. Trees that bore no fruit were also not allowed within 50 cubits of the town. I believe that this bit of information adds context to the story. This maybe even displays the desperateness of Zacchaeus. He climbed this sycamore tree that could not be in the center of town, and yet when Jesus was passing through, his last-ditch effort was to climb this tree so that he could see Jesus. Furthermore, culturally speaking, people were obliged to cut off the low branches of sycamore trees that overhung a property line wall. I think these details about the planting restrictions of sycamore trees really leads us to the conclusion that Zacchaeus was desperate to see Jesus. And in his desperateness, Jesus befriends him and welcomes his friendship. And Jesus enters his home even and extends to him salvation. How desperate are you to see Jesus? Is the question of this devotion today. How desperate are you to see and feel his touch of grace and love? How desperate are you to transform your life through what Jesus can do for you? How desperate are you to say, Lord, here I am, use me? And Jesus' words to this man, salvation now has come to this household, must have literally made him feel 10 feet tall. This once tax collector, outcast named Zacchaeus, met Jesus and realized his need for him. So step out in faith. And if you want to feel 10 feet tall yourself, know that Jesus has a plan for your life. And he wants to say to you, salvation has come to this household. So extend your trust in him as your Savior and live for him. Be encouraged until next time. Shalom.